If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue to unravel the mysteries behind the remaining Underworld Kingdoms and the origins, motives and cultures of the Wraiths that claim them as their home. This episode will focus on the Swar, the Dark Kingdom of India. There is no denying, dear explorer, that life in the underworld would bring much disappointment to pretty much anyone and everyone. I don't think I need to extrapolate this further, given our many discussions on this very topic, albeit in a variety of different forms. The reasons are as varied as the denizens of the underworld, whose attachment to faith mirrors such scales. We have touched upon almost all the Dark Kingdoms now, and those that are outside of Studio's reach tend to have a far more personal relationship with their new ghostly home. Similar claims can be said for the Swarga, one of the many names given to the ghostly Dark Kingdom under the control of India. They also have quite a political nature too, as we shall soon explore. There are many faiths in the southern Asia, as I'm sure you know. Sikhism and Buddhism are another two, as well as Islam and Christianity, all of which have their own vision of the afterlife. In India, the vast majority of believers are Hindu, which has the effect of most of the underworld of India being followers of the Hindu faith too. Swar, or Swarga, the city of delights, is the city of the dead of India. Just as Stygia serves as the capital of the Dark Kingdom of Iron, Swar serves as the head of the city of the Bruva, the Indian Shadowlands. We know that Swarga dominates this portion of the underworld, and there may be other kingdoms that may exist beyond the seas of Shiva, the Indian Wraith term for the Tempest, but neither Stygian Wraith or the Phoenix Institute members have yet to discover them. On that note, the Stygian or Western Wraith may find Swarga to be similar to their own Dark Kingdom of Iron when you compare terms like this, but this, as previously discussed, in rather foolish, leading one to fall into a false sense of security and destroyed by goodness knows what, like the Pishas, malformed wraiths that stop at nothing to cause physical pain and suffering to anyone they meet. One could compare them to the Shades of the West, which obviously makes solo travel an arduous task. In Buddhist and Hindu mythologies, Pishas are flesh-eating demons in dharmic religions. A responsibility with tradition and the personal cycle is not so important to the average Western Wraith, unlike the average Indian Wraith, who understands the distinction between unfinished business and karmic debt a bit better. Indian Wraiths that follow the Hindu faith believe the corporeal being is composed of three parts, known as the three-body doctrine, or the Karana Sarara, or casual body. It is the seed, the being of beginninglessness, ignorance, from which the other two parts spring. Suhala Saharia, or the gross body, is the material, physical mortal body that eats, breathes, and moves or acts. It is composed of many diverse components produced by one's karmas or actions in past life out of the elements which have undergone Pajakarania, i.e. combining of the five primordial Zatu elements. And also, Sakshama Sarara, or the subtle body, is the beginning of the mind and the vital energies which keep the physical body alive. Together with the casual body, it is the transmigrating soul, or Jiva, separating from the gross body upon death. The soul, or Javi, is still tethered to the Shwala Saharia when they die, rendering that part of them useless. Proper care is required to allow the soul to pass on via important ritual rites, or funeral rites I should say, known as the Anti-City, which is very according to the caste and religious sect of the deceased, but generally involves cremation followed by disposal of the ashes in a sacred river. Anti-Yeshti rites are the final sacraments, or samshakaras, in a series that ideally begins at the moment of conception and is performed at each important stage of life. At the approach of death, relatives and Brahmins or priests are summoned where mantras, sacred texts are recited, and ceremonial gifts are prepared. After death, the body is removed as soon as possible to the cremation grounds, which are usually located on the banks of a river. The eldest son of the deceased and the officiating priest perform the final cremation rites. For 10 days thereafter, the mourners, the immediate family members, are considered impure and are subject to certain taboos. During this period, they perform rites intended to provide the naked soul of the deceased with a new spiritual body with which it may pass on to the next life. Ceremonies include the setting out of milk and water and the offering of rice balls. At a prescribed date, the bones are collected and disposed of by burial or immersion in a river. Rites honoring the dead, called Swarga, continue to be performed by the survivors at specific times. Without such ceremonies, even the most virtuous soul can be warped and deformed by the imprisonment in the Swar Sahara. The soul, or the Javia, is divided into Gunas, which is Sanskrit, an ancient and classical language of India in which ever first book of the world of the Rigveda was compiled for strands or qualities. Gunas are energetic forces that weave together to form the universe and everything in it. There are 3 Gunas, each one with its own unique attributes. The tamas, meaning stability, is described as the force of entropy, lethargy, and stagnation which can relate to the shadow and angst, but this isn't seen as a solely bad thing here. It is an exaltation that calms and steadies. Tamas is also translated as matter, and it predominates in any subject, or object I should say, that is seemingly solid. That's table, laptop, or bicycle over there. In nature, tamas destroys plant matter so it can be reabsorbed into the earth and nourish new life. In your body, dasmic energy is prevalent in the muscles, bones, and flesh. In asana practice, it grounds your feet and helps you balance. Rajas, meaning activity, is what is said to get you moving. It is also the energy of change, unbridled enthusiasm, passion, and the self-confidence to get stuff done. Rajas energy is future dedicated and often manifests as longing, yearning, or sorrow. The vibration of Rajas is a higher frequency than tamas and is thus compared to passions and pavos. Sattva, meaning consciousness, is the psyche and Edolian in Wraith terms. In more spiritual terms, it is radiant presence, unadulterated truth, and compassionate, selfless action. The quality of sattva is clear, focused, calm, and receptive. It is the pause where you are free from thoughts, worries, and judgments, just for the moment, so you can listen and act more with your higher intellect and less from ego. This means that it only really comes forth when tamas and rajas are balanced, which is a constant dance of the energies. According to Hindu cosmology, the universe is divided into worlds, or realms known as loka. Bhuva-luka is the second main world, said to reside between Bhau-luka, the earthly physical world, and the sun. It contains both the Earth's atmosphere and the space that exists directly above it, and is home to celestial beings known as Siddhas. To expand upon Siddhas briefly, Siddha is a term that is used widely in Indian religions and culture. It means one who is accomplished, and speaks of perfected masters who have achieved a higher degree of physical as well as spiritual perfection or enlightenment. In Jainism, the term is used to refer to liberated souls. There is no orthodox belief concerning the path a soul takes to rebirth. All paths, regardless of length, lead to enlightenment. Persecution due to belief is much more uncommon than persecution due to action in the City of Delights. For our line of work, we can assume this is their understanding of the Western concept of wraithly transcendence, but again, there is much more to it than that. The concept of transmigration of souls is a central concept of Indian cosmology, colouring the Indians' race views of oblivion and transcendence, even when concerning the likes of gods and demons. You're probably aware of the idea already, but the ultimate goal here is to break the cycle and achieve unity with Atman, the unchanging and eternal world. It is this unity that is seen as transcendence to many an Indian wraith, whilst others believe it is the next step to the pathway of incarnation. This also places oblivion in an interesting light when looked through a Stygian lens. Oblivion, sometimes described as the concept of Adharma, is not feared as much, but seen as a step back backwards of the celestial ladder, a less favourable incarnation, not an end to the psyche. This is because Wraiths in India have been judged by Yama, the Hindu god of death and justice, and is responsible for the dispensation of law and punishment of sinners in his abode. Yamaloka, Wraiths have unresolved business, defined by them and ultimately by Yama, and leaving them to reside in Bhuva, one of the Loka, which is one of the 7 upper worlds in Indian cosmology. On the topic of the Wheels of Fate, just for a moment, the Wheel of Life, also known as the Bhavakakra, is a symbolic representation of the life cycle existence that Buddhists believe in. Buddhists believe in the continuous circle of birth, life, and death. They believe that you can only be liberated from this cycle of rebirth when enlightenment is achieved. It is probably a very complex thing to think about, isn't it? It's a bit of a mouthful attempting all those terms not native to my own tongue, but allow me to try and simplify things a little bit as we look a bit more of the underworld now, specifically the various words I hinted at before. Indian cosmology has one belief that has many levels and worlds. There are 7 lokas, which are the upper worlds. Loka is Sanskrit for world. You don't need to know all of them right now, but Bhu-Loka is our world, the Skinlands. Layered atop of that is the Bhuva-Loka, which, for all intents and purposes for this discussion, Bhuva is identical to the Shadowlands, except the outlook, as you probably have worked out by now. It is a temporary stop where one works out their karmic debt occurred in life, evaluated by Yama servitors, the judges. Whilst they serve a very similar function to the Stygian Reapers, they bestow tradition and faith rather than manacles and chains, which can just be, or if not more so, burdening in some cases. Using fatalism, judges have the Enfants recite their lives before deciding how the Enfant drive the heavenly regent to gain entrance into the City of Delights, which is obviously a very long process filled with baroque bureaucracy with little to no recognition of merit or hard work. The spiritually motivated encourage Wraiths to resolve their fetters, whilst those driven by greed and power lust advocate the wholesale refutation and destruction of fetters, so Swar can receive those souls on their behalf. Some that are taken into Swar are rumoured never to be seen again, as the judges are just as human as the rest of the Wraiths present in the underworld and just so easy to corrupt. Of course, if they were granted access to move on, you wouldn't need to see them again, right? There are some, of course, that want to be part of the Swar pleasures and treasures, not just on their hands and needs and servitude, and loathing the elite forcing them into slavery. They would rather war against the City of Delights, as the serpentine Naga of myth war on the gods for their wealth, hence the faction of the Naga. They wish to breach the walls of Swarga in any way they can. There have been instances of them attempting to break through the walls of the City of Delights, but none have been very successful. The Nagas are sent to reside in Patala, one of the 7 lower or netherworlds known as Talas that mirror the Lokas. Patala corresponds with Bhu-Loka, Mahala, and Bhuva-Loka and Tatatala, the Tempest or Sea of Shiva, I should mention here. Their largest stronghold is the Bhuvagati, is said to be its equivalent to the City of Delights. In our understanding, the Naga occupy spaces in the Matala and Talatala as well. Another rebellious faction, the Asura, claim the Sutala and the Rastatala lower worlds that mirror the Janaloka and Mahaloka respectively. They too show great disdain for the host of Swarga. They do not envy the rubies and pearls of the City of Delights, but outright resent them, seeing Swar not as a step in reincarnation, but a mirror of the old world, so to speak. They know, or feel, depending on who you ask, that attacking straight on is a pointless endeavour, so they focus on similar things, smaller things like cartels and smaller citadels. The general intent of such actions is to cripple lines of transport and disrupt things as much as possible. Only those who directly oppose the Asuras are fought. They fight to learn the truth behind what they call the Great Lie, saving the Wraiths from whatever fate awaits them within Swarga's walls, and they secretly covet the working class of the Bhuva. The Swar Loga, or Swarga, or Swar, unlike the cold, colourless palace, gardenless boulevard, and disappointing citadels, Swar supposedly lives up to its namesake. Music permeates the air with palaces and gardens as far as the eye can see, the latter being the true gems of the City of Delights, all bursting with vivid colours, stuffed to the brim with loveliness. It is said that every inhabitant of the city was molliated into forms of great beauty and awe, adopting aspects of divinity such as blue or red skin, some even having a third eye. Singers and dancers perform and alluring courtiers sell their wares as dictated by their heavenly regent. And who is this figure I keep mentioning? An individual that speaks on behalf of Indra, the king of the Devas, godlike deities, and Swarga, heaven in Hinduism. He is associated with the sky, lightning, weather, thunder, storms, rains, river flows, and war. The heavenly regent is not just some spokesperson, but an avatar of Indra, one aspect of the god who designed to guide the Wraith through their cycle. Our research suggests he takes the form of an intensely attractive, well-muscled man with a full beard and sensuous lips, in essence, the very image of Indra. He, the Reveille Regent, rarely leaves Swarga and is rarely by himself, preferring the company of his courtiers aplenty. In dazzling technicolor, he is said to visit other temples in disguise via the aid of Arkonos to spy on his servitors. You would be right thinking there is a dark, ugly truth behind it, which is in the form of the highly respected Tavistreyas, supposedly named after a god of artisans. They dissolve unfortunate wraiths and literally shape the distilled stuff of their souls into plants, food, water, and soma, an actual drink in Swarga, a powerful and intoxicating beverage. The ritual of dissolution and reformation is no small thing, requiring an enormous amount of skill and knowledge. The Tavistreyas are highly respected and prized within Swarga, and it's no surprise that without them, the false paradise would collapse, and the elite of the city would have nothing to acknowledge their own bleak mortality. But how do they do this? Well, with a unique arcana known as Displace, which is a mixture of inhabit, molliate, and uracy. As you would expect, no Stygian wraith can practice this art, if you can call this such a thing. It gets weirder still, as the main thing that separates Displace with uracy and molliate, a Tavistreya must rave ride a target before they can perform their magic, so to speak. As you can imagine, this makes the Tavistreya, or anyone who practices Arkonos, excellent spies. You can probably imagine the variety of botched attempts. As for the rest of India, oh lord, what a bloated, loaded statement that is! India has a terribly grand history, filled with tragedy weighed equally with beauty and blood, where the infamous caste and classism is seen as a large problem within the country, as the colonialism of the reign of Queen Victoria that has been gnawing away at the back of your mind. The underworld of India maybe defined these elements that you are more than welcome to look into, which I strongly advise you to do, but it is far much more than that, I assure you. The Western world scoffs at the existence of the restless dead, for it is obsessed with that is tangible. It cannot be seen, touched, or measured. It does not exist. Many cultures, specifically that of India cultures, are far more sanguine about the presence of ghosts. Unlike the West, the veil between the worlds is thinner, simply because more people believe in India. It makes you wonder what exactly the goal of Swarga is, or is that just me? To be kept updated, follow the Lord by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.